Yo, what's shaking, everybody? It's another edition of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That guy over there is Anwar Richardson. And we're doing another conversation about Arch Manning today, his importance to this Texas football program on what essentially is the eve of his official visit coming this weekend. Do us a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel, get notifications, tell your friends about us. And just know that we will have live chats, these videos, game breakdowns when the season starts. We've got the best post-game show in the business by far. A lot of reasons to be joining our ship. And oh, by the way, this version of this video brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. They will match up to 100% of a deposit to your first deposit up to $100. Just use the promo code Orangebloods and go get your daily fantasy, your season fantasy. Let Underdog be the scratch to your itch on the fantasy football, fantasy sports front. Mr. Richardson, I'm waiting. You teased me before we started recording with the topic of today's show. You have me like on bated breath. I want to hear Onward take us in the direction we're going today.
So, Ketch, we've talked about the conversation of Arch, and one of the things that I asked you in our Monday overreaction show, if anyone has a chance to see it, go back and check it. And we had a really good conversation. One of the things I asked you about was, the potential of this being a miss because, essentially, Steve Sarkisian is going all chips in on this recruitment of Arch Manning. And when you start thinking about, it's okay to swing for the fences. I got no problem swinging for the fences and going, all chips in on a guy per se, right? But Ketch, if they don't get Arch, when you start looking at the landscape, it becomes really tricky for Texas more than any other program. So look at this. So Alabama, Ketch, which is one of the schools that is trying to recruit him, they've already got a commitment from a quarterback. So Eli Holstein has already committed to them. So anything they get past Eli will be a bonus for them. There's also two players left on their board that they've offered. One guy, actually, Ketch, has no stars. His name is Brayson Hubbard, and he's got an Alabama offer. He's literally not ranked by rivals. So I'm pretty sure the moment if Arch says no, Brayson is ready to go, right? So Brayson is
committable because Alabama offers like 7,000 kids every year,
but they only offered seven. They only offered 7 quarterbacks, and he's one of the 7 that they offered. And there's another kid by the name of Dylan Loner Grain, or I'm butchering your name, Dylan, so I totally apologize. He's a 4-star out of Georgia. There's the only 2 guys left on their list out of the 7, okay? But they still got 2 guys left, okay? Georgia offered 11 guys. They still have two other guys, I believe, outside of Arch that are still left. Texas has offered 3. 2 guys are already committed, Ketch. And so basically that leaves them with Arch. And then I started looking at, Ketch, the rankings, and I had to look like your particular Lone Star rankings. There's 3 quarterbacks in the state of Texas that are on the rivals rankings. Jackson Arnold, who from Denton Guyer, already committed to Oklahoma. You've got Austin, how do you say his last name, out of Dripping Springs, that's going to Baylor. Novosad, am I saying that correctly?
That's good enough.
Good enough. He's ranked number 22. He's going to Baylor. At 89 is Bo Edmondson out of Lake Travis. He's going to Michigan State. So that basically means out of your top quarterbacks left in the state of Texas are pretty much off the board. You've got no other offers. It's almost like you would almost have to take an L in the 2023 class and hope to get something in the transfer portal. That's why I say, look, swing for the stars, but it's hard to have the conversation and say this is a huge risk and a huge gamble that Steve Sarkisian is taking.
I'm just not as anxious about it all. I totally get where you're coming from. It would be less than ideal in the 2023 class to just not sign a quarterback. However, I have seen it happen before. You know, I hate to go like history on you with a little bit of a historical side-by-side comparison, but from 99 to 2002, and I should say before I do this does not mirror the situation that Texas is currently in, although not 1,000% dissimilar. But from 99 to 2002, Texas signed 3 5-star quarterbacks. So they got Chris Sims, they got Chance Mock, they signed Vince Young. Then in 2003, they went after Kyle Wright, who was a 5-star quarterback out of California, Florida. I can't remember. I know Kyle Wright ended up going to Miami. They really didn't offer anybody else. They didn't get him. It was a little bit like the quarterback year this year, where the top-end prospects were just really limited. I mean, you know, I've got Jackson Arnold ranked as the number 1 quarterback in the state, but he's a mid to low 4-star guy. I've got him at number 21 in the country. Doesn't mean I don't think he's a good prospect, but he's not elite of the elite. There's a reason why I believe Texas didn't get involved with him. And then you really got to go even further down the rankings. So it's just not a good year inside the state of Texas at quarterback. Back in 2003, Texas doesn't take a quarterback. In 2004, they tried, right? So they, on purpose, decided we're not going to take anybody because they wanted to go all chips in 2004 on a kid named Rhett Bomar out of Grand Prairie. And Oklahoma ends up getting Bomar. And then the Longhorns scrambled after that. They tried to get the kid that went to Texas A&M. And now there's so many names in my head over the years that they tried to go after, God, why am I forgetting? Stephen McGee. I mean, God, he was only on the Dallas Cowboys. They went after Stephen McGee and missed on him. And then they tried to go to Kirby Freeman, who was committed to Miami out of Brownwood. And they missed on him. And Freeman kind of infamously, this is like 18 years ago, but infamously cursed Mac Brown out and basically said, you didn't want me until old boy said no. And now that he says no, now you want to talk to me. Get the hell on out of my house, my school, whatever the case may be. Kirby was a real one.
I like
Even
that.
if he turned out to be a nothing as a college football player, I have forever, almost 20 years, remembered his reaction to Mac Brown coming after him. So Texas went a donut hole in 2004. No quarterback in 03, no quarterback in 04. Now it makes the quarterback position in 2005 really important. This was the infamous Ryan Perilou class. Number 1 quarterback in the country out of Louisiana, committed to Texas for a long time. Oh, by the way, Texas had a second quarterback in that class by the name of Colt McCoy, who was just this high 3-star quarterback in a year where, again, not very deep inside the state of Texas. Perilou peels off of Texas on signing day to sign with LSU, and the Longhorns were left with Colt McCoy, who a lot of people loved the loyalty, didn't love his profile. And then even going into 2006, they tried it all over again and going after a little quarterback by the name of Matt Stafford. And they finished as the bridesmaid for Stafford, who goes to Georgia. They really didn't have the quarterback position in a good shape at all until at the very end, because Urban Meyer tried to pull the wool over a kid named Jevon Sneed by telling Sneed was a quarterback commitment for Florida. And a guy named Tim Tebow was also being recruited by Florida that year. Florida tells Sneed that Tebow's not even going to play quarterback. I told him, he's going to play tight end. Don't worry about him. Well, Jevon Sneed and his family saw a picture of Urban Meyer sitting on a golf cart with Tim Tebow's dad, and they knew the score. Texas eventually gets the national top 100 guy in 2006. I've seen this before, is what I'm saying. And it worked out for Texas back then almost by accident. Colt McCoy should never have quite been as good as he was. I look at what Texas has right now, and if they don't sign a quarterback in the 2023 class, I just don't know how big of a deal it is. Like, I think that means they will have the portal, at which point we know there will be quarterback prospects that enter the portal that they could, in theory, target there. And you'll have next year's recruiting class. And if you get an elite level guy, this becomes a problem. If you don't get Arch Manning and then next year you struggle to recruit well and your quarterbacks on campus aren't panning out the way you want them to. But given the state of the quarterback room as it is right now, I won't scream. I will not. I vow to everybody watching this video, there will not be panic in the streets from me if the Longhorns don't sign a quarterback in the 2023 class. It puts even more pressure on what I think Quinn Ewers has to do as the now defunct kind of de facto starting quarterback. And it does make what they do in 2024 really critical. But I get where you're coming from. And it will be a big L. Like, don't mistake me for saying I won't freak out if they don't take a guy in this class as me not saying it wouldn't represent a big L. The two things aren't mutually exclusive, in my opinion.
So that was good, and I appreciate the trip down memory lane. Let me also give you a recent trip though.
Okay.
Let's go 2015. Let's go to a quarterback class where I forget all the top targets that they missed out on, but they eventually get Kai Loxley, and then at the last minute, they throw Matthew Merrick a gray shirt in the 2015 class, right?
Right.
And none of those quarterbacks panned out. And then, it became desperation mode to get Shane Buechele the following year. But you had Tom Herman who comes in and inherits a room that didn't have much in there. And then, of course, they were able to get Sam Ehlinger. And that was a kind of a Charlie recruit. And Tom was able to hold on to that. But I can go back to a quarterback room during Charlie's tenure that ends up being one of his biggest downfalls. Ketch was never really adding to that room, to the strikes outs and the misses that were there from the time that he saw Tyrone Swoops in that spring game and never addressed that properly. And then, of course, brings in guys like a Gerard Herbert, doesn't really develop. They miss out clearly on what happens with Kyler Murray, you're supposed to keep his name out of your mouth, I believe. Is that still a thing, or is that over with?
I don't know, man. Like, if a guy tells you to keep his name out of your mouth 7 years ago,
yeah,
is there a statute of limitation on that? Like, I feel
it's like credit falling off after 7 years, right? Like after 7,
it should.
It falls off your credit report, right?
I've had him on my fantasy football team, and so I had to say his name. So I think I'm okay now. By the way, he got mad. He told me to keep his name out my mouth because I said he was Johnny Manziel with a jetpack on. Like, I'm the only guy that gets in trouble for, like, complimenting a guy profusely.
You're also the only guy that is rips on the state's history and gets in trouble for that as well. So I mean, there is that.
There is that.
But I hear what you're saying. You're not yelling your fire in a crowded theater at this moment. But all I'm saying, I think in an ideal world, and look, Ketch, maybe what this all means at the end of the day, Ketch, maybe what this means is that Texas, Sarkisian, they feel good. Like, they feel good about their standing. They feel they've got some assurances, maybe, some secret handshakes, whatever, that, you know what? We're really feeling you. And Sark doesn't want to upset the apple cart, right? He might just be saying, man, this thing is going good. No need to add anything else into that. And if that is the case and he ends up getting Arch at the end of the day, hey, he played it correctly. He did absolutely what he's supposed to do.
I think the difference between the situation that you described with Charlie back in 2015 or really in 2014 and going into 2015 is different because Texas didn't have in the cupboard at that point what it does now. So Charlie looking to try to bring Kyler in to save the program was occurring at a time when David Ash's eggs were scrambled. Swoops was clearly not a guy that they wanted to put all their chips in. And so there was a level of desperation that existed because if not him, who?
But by the way, just as a replay, they had Zach Gentry committed, and then he eventually had left. And I'm just going through their offer list there. So they had offered Josh Rosen. Zach Gentry was the guy that they had committed. He didn't come. Ricky Town was the guy. Drew Lock was an offer. Kyler Murray, as we talked about. Jarrett Stidham, Chad Precedent, and Chasen Virgil, and then eventually Matthew Merrick.
Now they tried. I just think the presence of Quinn Ewers and Maalik Murphy as a duo is what gives Texas the ability to be very low key and relaxed with this. If it was I'll tell you what, if it was just Maalik Murphy, I would start leaning more towards you, right? I would be saying you can't just gamble on that guy. That's too much risk. Quinn Ewers is supposed to be risk proof. I mean, that's what his profile says. And to have what's supposed to be a risk proof prospect, you add a guy in Maalik Murphy that you're able to spread out. So, technically Quinn Ewers is going to be a second-year player, even if a redshirt freshman, whereas Maalik Murphy will be redshirting this season. Those two guys are already separated. I think that is what makes the difference for me. It's Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers is such a key element to this Arch recruitment to begin with, in that his presence, if Arch were to come to Texas, prevents Arch from having to deal with too much hoopla. I mean, there will be hoopla no matter what. But Quinn is supposed to be the savior. And Arch would be the guy that comes in and follows up on what he ultimately has helped savior. So I think it's the presence of Quinn Ewers that changes this for me. And then to be able to combine that with a Maalik Murphy, I think gives the Longhorn the numbers they need. The portal also helps. Without Quinn Ewers, the whole conversation feels different. And I would agree with you about the risk component. I also think having Steve Sarkisian as the guy offering your scholarships from the quarterback development department is so different than what Charlie had. Right? I mean, they weren't doing a terrible job of getting guys to notice them, but you wouldn't have said the coaching that was in place then had the reputation specifically with quarterbacks that Steve Sarkisian brings to the table. It's why I know that no matter what happens with Arch, they'll be in a good spot with a nationally rated quarterback in 2024 come hell or high water, because everything suggests at this point that national quarterbacks are going to listen to Sark.
I mean, here's my only pushback to what you're saying, Ketch. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
So my only pushback to that is this. It's interesting what we pick and choose when we hold Alabama up as the standard. So because everyone always goes, well, Alabama does this, ... Well, so if we're going to use Alabama as a standard of all things that are holy, well, then Alabama has a commitment from a quarterback already. They've got a Bryce Young that's already there, who is already that guy. And they're saying, all right, yes, we got a quarterback of the now. we're going to get a quarterback as an insurance plan, but we're still going to get Arch. We're still going to go after Arch. Texas is saying we think we got the quarterback of the future, but we're going to go all chips in on one guy, so it's different than what Alabama is doing, and then we're going to go for Arch. So it's just I find it interesting, and I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect. What I'm saying is in every kind of conversation, it's always Alabama does this, Alabama does that, Alabama does this. So I'm like, well, if we're gonna hold Alabama as the gold standard, let's look at what they're doing. And I think that's cause for me, for my justification for a little bit of my trepidation, because I can say, well, they've already got a guy, and because Ketch, what if this doesn't happen? Okay, and this is the if in the world, and let's, of course, it's great if it does. If it doesn't happen, there really aren't many backup options. Everybody else I've listed who's in the contention for Arch has backup options. Texas doesn't really have a ton of backup options. And that's the part where I'm just like, ooh, I hope you seal the deal. I hope you bring it home. Sark, I hope this weekend ends up being, the earth, moon, and stars. And when it's all said and done, Arch says, Austin's my home, and this is where I want to be, because there's only one program I can see right now, Ketch, that it potentially impacts. Because even if you talk transfer portal, Ketch, you're talking transfer portal, you're going to try to convince a guy to come in here and be a backup. And that's not the easiest task, because these guys in the transfer portal want to go somewhere and be a starter. So how many guys are you going to see, quality quarterbacks, that are saying, I'm going to come in here and back up Quinn Ewers? And then within that room, then Maalik Murphy, you're telling Maalik, hey, well, now you got to compete against this person. How does he take that? It just there's a risky domino thing that I don't want to ignore and make it seem like it doesn't exist.
It's risky. I mean, don't confuse me being aloof-ish to the importance of what that risk means. You know what I mean? Like, I'm saying I wouldn't freak out. And I've outlined the reasons why I wouldn't. It's risky. And look, your Alabama point isn't unfair. I mean, let's outline what Alabama has done in its last 3 recruiting classes at quarterback before this year. So they go Bryce Young, they go Jalen Milroe, and they go Ty Simpson. All guys that were either 5 stars or national, like, top 30 players. I'd have to go back and look what Ty Simpson was, but there was a lot of conversation about Ty Simpson or our boy out of Austin Westlake, Cade Klubnik. Like, which of those 2 guys, there was 15 months ago, there was a conversation that centered around both of those players, and would you take a commitment from one guy first over the other? Alabama hasn't missed a year in recruiting, and they haven't landed a scrub at all in the last 3 years. This year, they're going after the number 1 quarterback in the country, or number 2, depending on what you think about the kid out of Southern California. And they do have another quarterback already tied up. I guess at the end of the day, Alabama's going to do Alabama things. That is so – it's so – I mean, because Eli Holstein is that kid is currently a number 45 in the country for Rivals.com, and a national top 50 player. I think that if they were to get a commitment from Manning, Holstein likely peels off and goes somewhere else, and Alabama doesn't care. We talk about kids placeholding scholarships all the time. This might be the rare case where the school is placeholding. They can do it like that. I think the bigger point that you make, though, is, look, Alabama's not skipping cycles. And for Texas to be in a position where it might skip a cycle, there is a little bit of – there's got to be some pain in there somewhere. That you don't just get a freebie automatically and say that there's no impact whatsoever. I do think the fact that Texas comboed up at quarterback last year with 2 guys that they'll be able to spread out into different classifications, I think it makes it slightly different, but your point's not lost. And it raises the stakes. Because, look, if you get Arch, Quinn isn't as important anymore, right? Because it's like, well, Quinn doesn't have to save the universe. Just save a continent. Save the state of Texas and North America. The goal of saving the entire universe, that can fall on to the next 5-star quarterback who looks like a sure NFL prospect kind of a thing. You take Arch out, and you don't know what you have in Maalik. You don't have that surefire safety net behind Quinn. It makes these next couple of years with Quinn super pressurized because, and here maybe we haven't said the quiet part out loud. No matter what Quinn does, if Texas has Arch, it feels like Steve Sarkisian is safe.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't get Arch and Quinn Ewers isn't the guy, Steve Sarkisian is far from safe at that point. And those stakes seem really, really high in retrospect when we talk about the Manning recruitment. You get him, and it's real nice and easy and casual around the 40 acres. If you don't, Quinn Ewers better be a rock star.
You're 100% correct, because you know that at the end of the day, Sarkisian becomes the guy that every quarterback wants to play for, right? He becomes like Lincoln Riley, right? Like, man, if you're a 5-star quarterback, that's the place that you want to be. That's the place. Like, that's where the guys go. And so you start developing that reputation, and one thing begets another, that begots another. But like, yes, if for some reason it doesn't happen, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Because it kind of, you think about Herman. If Herman keeps Ewers' commitment, it would have made him harder to fire. And I think about Shaka getting almost an extra year because of Greg Brown, and in the end, that almost meant nothing. But boosters and athletic directors, pay attention to who's next. And if you have Arch Manning, you know what? If you get Arch Manning to commit, you could go 7-5 this year, and there's still some real security around Steve Sarkisian that I don't know if he goes 8-4 but doesn't get Arch Manning. I don't know that he quite still has. It is a funny thing what we do with 5-star quarterback prospects and the directions they allow us to like choose the way we choose to just interpret reality. I think it took us until the very end, but the single riskiest component of missing and going all chips in on Arch is it makes what the hell happens on the football field this year about 5 times more important than it otherwise would have needed to be. Look, any final comments on that?
I think at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it makes the upcoming weekend of recruitment of Arch that just that much more important. I think, I guess my thing is I think Sarkisian has more to lose than any of the other teams that are competing, for him.
Well, that's true.
And so, everyone else I think is fine. It'd be love to have him, but Georgia's like, what are we going to do? Not win another national title because, we don't not have them. Saban and those guys, they still got a strong team. And he's like, well, we'll still got a quarterback. There's only one team that boy, if you don't get them, you can see like, okay, that domino's there. And to your point, it's like, well, if you don't get them, then what does the season look like? What does Quinn Ewers need to do? Like all these other little things that go forward. I think the train keeps moving along for everybody else. That makes this weekend just important. Now, the good thing for Sarkisian, Ketch, is essentially he's got to just keep doing what he's been doing in order to stay in here. And Ketch, I know there's a world where Arch, this is one of my final things I'll say. I know there's a world where Arch could wait until the fall and just kind of see how the chips fall and where they may. But, there's also a world too, Ketch, if you're Sark, you don't want to lean on Arch too much because that's not necessarily what you do. But if you want to lean on a little and say, hey, what do you think? We've been doing this dance for a long time, man. What do you think about just going ahead and let's just making this thing happen? I think you and I get along great. I see you and I together in a long-term relationship. I don't know if he's got to get down on one knee, but it wouldn't hurt to come out and by the end of June to have an Arch commitment, as opposed to doing that thing of waiting to see what happens in the season. It's not to say they won't have a good season, but it wouldn't hurt to say, you know what, Arch, you and I belong together. Why don't we make this thing happen?
The thing is, you could almost make the case that we're getting to the point where Arch not being committed, if he was going to commit, it's kind of already done the damage, because guys are deciding where they're taking official visits. Schools are getting put into orders. Guys in the 2023 class, are getting their shit together. Mm-hmm. They can't sit around and afford to wait on what's a guy going to do. Whereas if you get that guy early, it's one of the reasons why we see quarterback recruiting usually get done so much earlier, because you can plant that flag. He can show up at every event and be like, I'm Arch Manning. I'm kind of a big deal. Come hang out with me. I'll sign autographs for your family. Like, there's a thing that he can do that the later he waits, the less impactful he's going to be on the 20. Texas fans live in this world where they want to believe he's going to be a rainmaker. Maybe, but the power of his ability to make rain, I think, lessens every day that passes. There's no question if you're Texas and you could get him to commit earlier, you'd absolutely do it. Him waiting till August, September. God, imagine a world where he goes to the Texas-Alabama game on an unofficial visit, uncommitted.
Oh, jeez.
Jeez. It could happen.
Yes.
It could easily happen. It would easily be justified for a guy that says, I just want to make sure I'm not making a mistake, and that once I commit, I want to stay committed. We know it. We've talked about that game. We don't have to do it now. It is an ominous cloud that hangs over a Texas football team that, quite frankly, I can make a case that every other game on paper, there shouldn't be any ominous clouds the rest of the way on the schedule. But there's one, and it's early in the season, and this is a guy that says, I want to wait. I want to see. I want to make sure that once I commit once, I don't have to change my commitment for any reason whatsoever. You can almost hear him talking about Texas. He's not talking about Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, correct.
That statement doesn't apply there. So it is fascinating. Can Texas do enough this weekend to sweep him off his feet and get him to change what he and his family have decided is his currently scheduled behavior? Good luck with that, because if you can do it, it would be vitally important. If you can't, then the show goes on, and there are consequences for that too. Look, do us a solid. Leave your Arch Manning take in the comments section. In the end, we ended up having a pretty healthy Arch discussion, and it was kind of global. But what do you specifically think about Anwar's point of how desperate the situation is, that it's risky, and that if Texas doesn't pull this off, it's a bigger risk than needed to be taken, given all the circumstances involved? It's a fascinating conversation, because I find myself straddling the fence on War. I do not disagree with you, and yet there's a part of me that's a little, I don't know, there's the portal, and no, yeah, like
you're going from like I don't know to like straddling. So that shows that I was able to at least do some sort of impact here.
Full on wishy-washy. And I'm rarely wishy-washy. I leave this conversation fully wishy-washy, and I think it was looking up I think the Alabama thing is what did it for me. It was like 5-star, 5-star, almost 5-star, almost. They just don't stop. And, oh, by the way, he was on campus last weekend. It must be nice to be the king and to just be able to flex like the king all the time. Clearly, Steve Sarkisian has taken a different method, towards recruiting Arch, but he has to because he kind of has no other choice. Saban's got choices. It goes with the territory. Like the channel, please. Come on. If you hung in this long, like the channel, subscribe to the channel. We will talk to you later today, as a matter of fact. Live show coming on at 7. Anwar's going live later in the week. We've got the modcast as well. Shout out one more time to Underdog Fantasy. Again, they will match up to $100. 100% of your first $100 deposit. Go play some fantasy sports. You got Game 6 of the NBA Finals around the corner, tomorrow or the next day? So, baseball, football, it's all covered. Underdog has your back. Let them give you $100. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.